44 million people went to see The Sound of Music in 1965. Box office records shattered. Oscars piled up. That same year, a psychological horror film opened in London to 14 people. 14. The director never worked in major cinema again. His career died overnight. Fast forward 60 years. That box office ghost taught every modern horror filmmaker how to build dread. Spielberg calls it essential viewing. Scorsese keeps it on his desert island list. And that director who got exiled? Now worshipped as a visionary who was simply too early. Welcome to the club nobody wanted to join, until everyone did. We're counting down 15 box office catastrophes from the 1960s that critics buried, audiences ignored, and studios tried to forget. Films that lost money, ended careers, got pulled from distribution, got literally banned. And then, slowly, decade by decade, became the foundation of modern cult cinema. By the end, you'll see the pattern. The exact same elements that made audiences flee in 1963 are why these films own entire subreddits today. Peeping Tom, 1960. Let's start with the career assassination. Michael Powell was British cinema royalty. The Red Shoes, Black Narcissus, A Matter of Life and Death, Prestige, Artistry, box office gold. Then he made a film about a serial killer who murders women while filming their deaths. The killer is sympathetic. The camera is the weapon. The audience is complicit. London critics didn't just pan it. They torched Powell personally. Essentially vicious. Sick mind. One review called it a mean, sly, vicious little film. The distributor panicked and pulled it from theaters within weeks. Powell's career evaporated. Hollywood stopped calling. He spent the next 2 decades in obscurity, making industrial films and documentaries nobody saw. But here's what the 1960 audience couldn't handle. Powell understood something about voyeurism and cinema that wouldn't become obvious for another 30 years. The killer's camera is your camera. His gaze is your gaze. When he films a victim's terror, you're watching through his lens. It's not just a thriller, it's an essay on why we watch horror in the first place. Deeply uncomfortable. Ahead by decades. Martin Scorsese discovered it in the 1970s and spent years campaigning for its restoration. Film students started programming it at midnight screenings. The BFI finally re-released it in 1979. Now, it's taught in every film theory class, referenced in every serious discussion of horror cinema's gaze problem. Criterion spine number. The works. If you love psychological horror that makes you question why you're watching, Peeping Tom is the godfather. And we're just getting started. The Innocents, 1961. Because the next disaster was a ghost story nobody trusted. 20th Century Fox greenlit a highbrow adaptation of Henry James's The Turn of the Screw, black and white, atmospheric, ambiguous, no monster reveal, no jump scares, just dread. Pure, slow burn, creeping dread. American audiences in 1961 wanted William Castle gimmicks, seats that buzzed, nurses in lobbies, skeletons on wires. The Innocents offered Freudian subtext and a governess who might be hallucinating dead children or might be surrounded by actual ghosts. The film never tells you which. Critics called it arty. Box office was soft. Fox dumped it on double bills and moved on. What they missed, cinematographer Freddie Francis created the blueprint for every slow-burn horror film you've binged on A24 or Shudder. Deep focus shots where something's always lurking in the background. Sound design that makes silence terrifying. The entire film builds to a climax that's just a child's face, and it's more horrifying than any gore. Deborah Kerr's performance as the governess is a masterclass in unreliable perspective. Is she protecting the children from supernatural evil, or is she the danger? The film refuses to answer, which infuriated 1961 audiences and is exactly why it's now. The film horror directors name-check when they want to sound smart. If The Shining, The Others, or The Witch are your comfort watches, The Innocents invented that vibe. But the 1960s wanted something louder. Cape Fear, 1962. Same year, different disaster, same director who'd later prove untouchable. J. Lee Thompson directs. Robert Mitchum plays Max Cady, a psychopath stalking Gregory Peck's family after getting released from prison. It's nasty. Mitchum is beyond menacing. He's evil with a South Carolina drawl and a plan. Initial box office? Mid-range. Not a bomb, but not the hit Universal wanted. Critics were mixed. Too dark, too mean, too much Mitchum leering at underage Lori Martin. The film got buried in Universal's catalog, overshadowed by bigger releases. But here's the thing about evil that movie audiences couldn't process yet. Mitchum made Cady almost reasonable. He doesn't just want revenge. He wants to make Gregory Peck feel what he felt. There's a logic to his cruelty. That's more disturbing than random violence. Late-night TV discovered it first. Then Scorsese remade it in 1991 with De Niro doing a full Mitchum impression, and suddenly everyone went back to watch the original. They found Bernard Herrmann's score, terrifying. They found Thompson's blocking, Mitchum shot from low angles, like a nightmare you can't escape. They found a thriller that understood psychological torture better than most films learned decades later. Rule number 1. If your villain is more compelling than your hero, you're making something dangerous. And dangerous ages like wine. The Manchurian Candidate, 1962. Now we get to the one that was too paranoid for paranoid times. John Frankenheimer, Frank Sinatra, Lawrence Harvey. Angela Lansbury playing Lawrence Harvey's mother and also seducing him, which is exactly as deeply wrong as it sounds. A Korean war vet gets brainwashed into becoming a political assassin. The conspiracy goes all the way to the top. The film opened in October 1962, right as the Cuban Missile Crisis had Americans digging bomb shelters. They wanted escapism, not a thriller about American soldiers getting mind-controlled by communists to assassinate a presidential candidate. Box office was disappointing. Then, 14 months later, JFK was assassinated in Dallas. Sinatra, who owned the rights, pulled the film from distribution entirely. For 25 years, you couldn't see it. Couldn't rent it. Couldn't stream it, obviously. It became a ghost. Until 1987. Sinatra authorized a re-release. Gen X film geeks who'd only heard rumors finally saw it and lost their minds. The brainwashing sequence, surreal, nightmarish, shot in a way that makes you feel the mind control, was unlike anything Hollywood had made since. The twist with Angela Lansbury's character became the bar every political thriller had to clear. Demme used it as a template for The Silence of the Lambs. The Wachowskis studied it before making The Matrix. If you're into conspiracy thrillers that treat the audience like they can handle moral complexity. This is the Genesis text, and it was hidden for a quarter century because history made it too uncomfortable to watch. Whatever Happened to Baby Jane, 1962. 3 disasters in 1962 alone. Hollywood was not okay. Robert Aldrich convinced Bette Davis and Joan Crawford, both past their studio prime, both desperate for relevance, to play 2 aging sisters living in a decaying Hollywood mansion. One's a former child star, one's a former movie star. Both are broke, bitter, and trapped together. It's grand guignol psychological horror disguised as a melodrama. Warner Brothers gave it a tiny budget, 0 expectations, and a dump release. Critics called it grotesque. The Academy ignored it. But something weird happened. Word of mouth from women who saw 2 Hollywood icons playing characters Hollywood had discarded turned it into a slow-burn earner. Not a bomb, but definitely not the prestige win Aldrich wanted. The film got labeled camp, which in 1962 was a dismissal. Decades later, Baby Jane became the template for every aging diva horror film, for every hagsploitation thriller, for every dark comedy about fame's cruelty. Lady Gaga and Adam Driver in House of Gucci, playing in Baby Jane's sandbox. Feud, Bet and Joan, the Ryan Murphy series, exists because this film demonstrated that watching icons devour each other is timeless entertainment. The dinner scene, where Davis serves Crawford a dead rat, is cinema's pettiest, most horrifying power move. And the final shot on the beach might be the greatest ironic twist on Fame ever filmed. If you love dark comedies about ambition and decay, Baby Jane wrote the rules. Shock Corridor, 1963. Samuel Fuller didn't do subtle. Shock Corridor is a journalist who fakes insanity to get committed to a mental asylum, planning to solve a murder and win a Pulitzer. What he finds instead: America's sickness, racism, nuclear paranoia, sexual repression, all inside one institution. Fuller shot it guerrilla style, low budget, black and white, except for hallucinatory color sequences that feel like fever dreams. Critics called it exploitative. Distributors barely released it. Audiences who stumbled into it walked out confused or angry. The film's not a thriller. It's Fuller using genre mechanics to scream about civil rights and Cold War madness. But here's what midnight movie programmers found in the 1970s. Shock Corridor predicted everything. The asylum becomes a microcosm of America eating itself. One patient thinks he's a Confederate general. Another is a black activist who's internalized so much hatred he now thinks he's in the KKK. The runtime is 90 minutes of Fuller refusing to let you look away. Scorsese watched it. Jarmusch watched it. Every indie filmmaker trying to make a message film with no money has studied how Fuller turned $100,000 into a hallucinogenic nightmare. It's aggressive, it's unpolished, and it's more relevant now than it was in 1963. If you love Joker but wished it took bigger swings, Shock Corridor is your unhinged predecessor. The Haunting, 1963, Robert Wise just came off West Side Story. He had Oscars, he had clout, he chose to make a black and white ghost story with zero special effects, no monster, and an all-female emotional core. Hill House is the villain. The architecture is wrong. Doors that shouldn't exist, angles that don't make sense. And Eleanor, played by Julie Harris, might be causing all of it with her mind. MGM marketed it as a traditional haunted house movie, and audiences showed up expecting 1960s horror, visible ghosts, screaming clear answers. What they got was ambiguous psychological unraveling. Is the house haunted, or is Eleanor's repressed trauma manifesting? The film whispers instead of shouts. Box office underperformed. MGM shelved it fast. Then horror evolved. Kubrick watched The Haunting before making The Shining and borrowed its spatial wrongness. Every modern is it ghosts or mental illness? Horror owes this film. The sound design, the pounding on the door, the breathing in the walls, is still taught in film school as the gold standard for auditory dread. There's a moment where Eleanor holds another woman's hand in the dark, seeking comfort, and realizes she's holding nothing. No CGI, just blocking and performance. It's more terrifying than any jump scare you've watched this year. If you're tired of ghosts that show up on camera and prefer dread you can't screenshot, The Haunting is required viewing. Same year, same American audience that wasn't ready. The Raven, 1963, Roger Corman, Vincent Price, Boris Karloff, Peter Lorre. A gothic horror comedy that's not quite horror, not quite comedy, and way too weird for the drive-in teens who showed up wanting straight Poe. Corman shot it in 15 days to fulfill a contract. Price and Lorre improvised half their dialogue. A young Jack Nicholson shows up as Lorre's son and looks utterly confused the entire time. American International Pictures dumped it on double bills. Critics ignored it. The box office barely covered costs. It got buried in AIP's massive post-cycle output, overshadowed by Corman's more serious adaptations like The Mask of the Red Death. Decades later, film geeks rediscovered it and found something precious. Corman letting legends goof off. Price dueling Karloff with magic while Laurie delivers drunk line readings is proto-midnight movie chaos. It's not trying to be important. It's just Vincent Price turning a raven back into Peter Lorre for 15 minutes of screen time and everyone involved clearly having the time of their lives. The film's now a staple of Corman's Weird Ones lists. It proved you could make Poe camp before Tim Burton made a career of it. And Nicholson's early awkwardness is charming in retrospect. You can see him learning to be weird on camera. If you love horror comedies that don't pander, The Raven is the 60s doing Gonzo before Gonzo had a name. The Mask of the Red Death, 1964. Corman again, but this time he went full art film. Shot in England, painted sets, saturated Technicolor that looks like a Dario Argento nightmare. Vincent Price as a Satanist prince hosting a masquerade ball while plague ravages the countryside outside. Bergman-inspired dream sequences, a dwarf performance artist character, a finale where Death shows up dressed in red and Price realizes he's been worshiping the wrong god. AIP wanted another Castle and Cleavage quickie. Corman delivered a meditation on moral decay wrapped in horror iconography. American drive-ins didn't know what to do with it. Too slow, too arty, too European. Box office was minimal. It got double-billed with another Poe film to justify the release. European critics loved it. British Sci-Fi magazine gave it a rave. But American audiences in 1964 weren't checking European reviews. The film sank. Then home video happened. Then Criterion happened. Then every film student studying color as psychological tool discovered Corman shot a $1 million art horror film that looks like $10 million. The ballroom scene, 7 rooms, each a different color, each representing a sin, is production design as philosophy. The reds are so red they hurt. The final dance with death is surreal and gorgeous and horrifying. If you love horror that's visually excessive and unapologetically operatic, Mask is Corman's masterpiece, pretending to be a B-movie. The Tomb of Ligeia, 1964. Last Corman Poe entry, this one barely got released. Vincent Price as a widower obsessed with his dead wife, who may or may not be haunting him from beyond the grave via a black cat with hypnotic eyes. It's Edgar Allan Poe meets Rebecca meets whatever Corman felt like filming that week in an actual English abbey. AIP gave it the smallest release of the entire Poe cycle. Critics didn't review it. Drive-ins played it as filler. Price completists watched it and forgot it. The film's failure marked the end of Corman's Poe run, 8 films in 5 years, and the box office was finally exhausted. But home video revealed something. Ligeia is the weirdest of them all. Price's performance is more restrained, more sad than camp. The cat is genuinely unsettling. Corman shoots it like a demon. The ending, where Price's character confronts his obsession, is surprisingly mature for a 60-minute Gothic potboiler. It became a deep cut for Corman fans. The one casual viewers miss, but the devoted treasure. Proof that even in contractual obligation mode, Corman was weirder and more ambitious than most directors trying their hardest. If you want Vincent Price playing broken instead of theatrical, Tomb of Ligeia is the hidden gem in a catalog of gems. Repulsion, 1965, Roman Polanski's first English-language film. Catherine Deneuve as a manicurist in London, slowly losing her mind in her apartment while her sister is away. Walls crack. Hands reach out from nowhere, or she's hallucinating, or she's not. The film refuses clarity. It's just Deneuve's face, the apartment decaying, and a growing sense that something very bad is about to happen. British distributor barely promoted it. American release was limited to art houses. Mainstream audiences wanted James Bond, not French New Wave psychological horror. Critics acknowledged Polanski's technical skill, but called it unpleasant. Box office was minimal. It got shelved by the studio. Then Polanski made Rosemary's Baby. Suddenly everyone rewatched Repulsion and found the blueprint. Domestic spaces turned hostile. Paranoia that might be justified. A woman's perspective treated seriously in a horror framework. The apartment becomes a character, peeling, rotting, breathing. The hallway scene, where the walls seem to grab at Deneuve, was done with minimal effects and maximum atmosphere. It's pure cinema, using space, light, and performance to create dread. Darren Aronofsky admitted he studied it for Black Swan, every descent into madness film since O's Polanski's debut. If you love psychological horror that's patient and merciless, Repulsion is the original slow-burn nightmare. Same mid-60s audience that wasn't ready for ambiguity. The War Game, 1965. The BBC commissioned Peter Watkins to make a documentary-style drama about nuclear war hitting Britain. Watkins delivered 70 minutes of unflinching, horrific realism. Firestorms, radiation sickness, martial law, mass graves. Shot like a newsreel from the apocalypse. No score, no relief, just Britain burning. The BBC took one look and banned it. Too disturbing, too real, too likely to cause panic. It was supposed to air on television. Instead, it got a limited theatrical release that almost nobody saw. Critics called it essential. Audiences stayed away because watching your country die on screen isn't entertainment. For 20 years, The War Game was the film you'd heard about but couldn't watch. Then the campaign for nuclear disarmament started screening it at protests. Universities programmed it. By the 80s, as Cold War tensions peaked again, it became the document, proof that someone in 1965 understood exactly how bad it could get. Watkins won an Oscar for Best Documentary Feature, despite the film being banned in his home country. The irony was not lost on anyone. Now it's studied as both groundbreaking filmmaking and a warning that aged too well. If you loved Threads or The Day After, The War Game invented that specific nightmare, and it was too good at it. Seconds, 1966, John Frankenheimer again. Rock Hudson in the least Rock Hudson role imaginable. A middle-aged banker gets recruited by a secret organization that fakes his death and gives him a new body, a new life, and a second chance at youth. Except the new life is worse. The freedom is suffocating. The new body is a prison. Hudson's character realizes too late that you can't escape yourself. Paramount marketed it as sci-fi. Audiences showed up expecting adventure. They got existential dreadshot like a horror film, distorted lenses, disorienting angles, a paranoid nightmare about identity and regret. Hudson's performance is devastating. The film bombed hard. Paramount buried it. Hudson later called it one of his favorites, but admitted it killed his leading man status for years. Criterion discovered it. Film students discovered it. The cinematography, James Wong Howe using fisheye lenses to make normal spaces feel alien, became a case study. The ending, where Hudson's character ends up on the operating table waiting for the next client, is one of the bleakest finales in American cinema. If you love Black Mirror or any sci-fi that makes you question self-improvement culture, Seconds did it first. With Rock Hudson in 1966, Point Blank 1967, John Boorman, Lee Marvin, a revenge thriller that's not quite a thriller, not quite a dream, not quite real. Marvin's character gets shot and left for dead at Alcatraz. He survives, or doesn't, and spends the film hunting down the crime syndicate that betrayed him, demanding his $93,000. But the syndicate is too big. The people he kills barely matter. The money might not even exist. MGM marketed it as a tough guy action film. Audiences expected straightforward noir. They got fragmented time, ambiguous reality, and a protagonist who might be a ghost hallucinating revenge. The film's structure is fractured, scenes out of order, dialogue overlapping, images repeating. Box office was disappointing, critics were confused. Then the 70s happened. Film students obsessed over Boorman's style. Soderbergh admitted Point Blank influenced the Limey's fractured timeline. The Coens borrowed its tone for Miller's Crossing. Angie Dickinson's performance became a reference point for every femme fatale trying to outthink the protagonist. The scene where Marvin walks through the Los Angeles nightclub, and the editing makes it feel like he's phasing through walls, is pure cinematic alienation. The film's not about whether he gets the money, it's about whether revenge means anything when the system is this corrupt and impersonal. If you love crime films that deconstruct the genre while wallowing in it, Point Blank is the bridge between classic noir and 70s New Hollywood. The Trip, 1967, Roger Corman producing, Jack Nicholson writing, Peter Fonda taking LSD for 90 minutes of screen time while Bruce Dern plays his sober guide. Dennis Hopper shows up. It's 1967. Everyone involved was probably high. AIP marketed it to the youth counterculture. Showings were chaotic, audiences actually dropping acid in theaters, which led to bad trips, complaints, and the film getting pulled from some markets. Mainstream critics called it exploitative hippie nonsense. Box office was scattered, big in college towns, dead everywhere else. But here's what happened. The Trip became the film, the document, the thing you watch to understand what Corman, Nicholson, Fonda, and Hopper were doing right before they made Easy Rider and changed American film forever. It's rough, it's weird, it's more interesting as cultural artifact than narrative. The visuals, solarized colors, fisheye lenses, kaleidoscopic transitions became the template for every drug sequence in film. Gaspar Noé watched this, Darren Aronofsky watched this. Any director trying to depict altered consciousness has encountered the Trip's vocabulary. If you love experimental 60s cinema that's unpolished and chaotic, The Trip is the primordial ooze. 1 year before Easy Rider, 2 years before Woodstock, right when everything was about to explode. Night of the Living Dead, 1968, George Romero, $114,000 budget. Shot in Pittsburgh, black and white, a farmhouse, zombies, no stars, no studio, pure independent hustle. The distributor who picked it up for theatrical release forgot to put a copyright notice on the prints, which immediately kicked the film into public domain. Romero lost millions in potential revenue. The film's opening weekend box office was modest. Critics were mixed. Some loved it, some called it repulsive. Then the late-night circuit found it, and it never stopped playing. Midnight movies, grindhouses, revival houses, dorm room VHS tapes. Every generation since 1968 rediscovered Night of the Living Dead and claimed it. The zombies became the template for every zombie since. The bleak ending. Ben survives the night only to get shot by a redneck posse who mistake him for a zombie, became one of horror's most devastating social commentaries. Romero's career launched. The entire zombie genre was born. Dawn of the Dead, 28 Days Later, The Walking Dead, World War Z. Every single modern zombie story traces back to this farmhouse in Pennsylvania, where Romero said, "What if survival horror was actually about humans being the real monsters?" The black and white cinematography makes the gore feel documentary real. Dwayne Jones as Ben, a black. Lead in 1968, written as a character whose race isn't his defining trait, was revolutionary. And the posse mistaking him for a zombie and killing him anyway? That's America. If you've watched any zombie content in the last 50 years, you're in Romero's debt. The film that bombed its opening lost its copyright and became public domain ubiquity. So here's the pattern: 15 films, same decade, same problem. Each one showed 1960s audiences something they weren't ready to see. Ambiguity in the innocence, complicity in Peeping Tom, conspiracy in The Manchurian Candidate, female rage in Baby Jane, social collapse in Shock Corridor, suburban paranoia in Rosemary's Baby, regret in Seconds, the apocalypse in The War Game, race in Night of the Living Dead. The films that flopped weren't worse. They were early. They understood where cinema was going before audiences did. They asked questions before the culture was ready to answer. And they survived because the films didn't need immediate success. They needed time. The rule is simple. Audiences reject what makes them uncomfortable. Then 20 years later, discomfort becomes the entire point.